Welcome to the B2B Growth Show, the human to human segment. I am Carlos Hidalgo, author of The Un-American Dream and Driving Demand, and also your host for this human to human segment. Today, I'm excited to have my good friend, one of the smartest people I know in B2B marketing, accomplished author, and I could go on, but I'm going to let him fill in the blanks for us. Mathew Sweezey, thank you for joining us on the B2B Growth Human to Human segment. Tell us a little bit about who you are.
Hey man, so good to be here, Carlos. Thanks for having me. So I am director of market strategy at a little company called Salesforce, and I focus on the future of marketing. So I own that POV for the organization. That's point of view. I do a lot of writing and research, working with large strategic companies. And it's kind of a ballpark of what I've got going on. And then, I said I write, and I've got that new book coming out from Harvard Business, The Context Marketing Revolution, launching on the 24th.
Well, congratulations to you. I know what it is to write a book. It's nothing easy. Lots of research. I know for this one particular, if I'm right, you've been working on this for 4 years, correct?
Yeah, 4 years. It's a long time.
Well, it is a long time, and especially as you talked about the future of marketing. If I think about 4 years ago to now, right, launch,
Yep.
um, I mean, the future of marketing. I mean, it's B2B marketing, especially, has changed so rapidly. Consumer marketing. I mean, 4 years ago, were we even talking about things like AI and machine learning? I think if you were, people were kind of giving you the suspect look. So I love the book. I love the context marketing revolution. You and I have spoken about this off air and multiple times. So give me an overview of what is the book when you say context marketing revolution. And then I am curious, like, how did you keep up with the future of marketing over 4 years?
Yeah, so let's hit the first one. So what is the context marketing revolution? So we talked about change, and change is rapid. But I think one of the big things that we've missed is we see change in an iterative stance, right? We see, how does this AI essentially improve the things that I've been doing before? How does this new technology improve the things I've been doing? And in all of those scenarios, we leave the underlying question of, what was I doing, alone, and don't question, is that even the
Mm,
right thing to be doing moving forward? And so
mhm,
that's really kind of the underpinning of this entire book, is proving out that we entered a new media era. And in that media era, essentially the new foundation is context. All digital channels operate for context. The consumers demand that they meet them in context. And then that shifts exactly what the definition, role, and function of marketing then must be. And then that research that we've done, so over the past, this will be the 5th year we've run the State of Marketing Research Report, and in total looked at about 20,000
great,
brands across the
great
globe.
report. Great report, by the way.
Oh, thank you. What we found is the number one key trait of high performing marketing organizations is executive buy-in to a new idea of marketing, right? And that aligns exactly with what we're talking about. That's where the word revolution comes in, because this isn't just a new marketing idea and saying, how do we apply context to my old idea of marketing? It says, no, we operate in a new media environment, and that affects all things. And that means we have to have a new concept of how we reach the consumer, because the consumer operates in different ways and demands different
Mhm.
things. And then this is not a simple iteration of old ideas. This is a revolutionary new concept for a new period of time. So that's just kind of a ballpark, of what the book's about. And then it dives into, how do you create context in any given moment? How do you transform this idea of marketing inside your organization? So it's really kind of what it's about. So I'm going to pause there, and then we can go back to the other question, if
Yeah,
into
we'll
that.
get to the other question here in a minute, but I wrote something down here because I love the fact that you use the word context. And I've been one who's promoted this idea, especially with content, and you talk about the fact that all of us now are content creators. If you have a LinkedIn profile, you can create content on a day-to-day basis, if not hour by hour. And I've used the word, and a lot of people use the word relevant. So, in your mind and in your research, is there a difference between context and relevance?
Yes, major difference. So let's define context really quickly. So context and this idea has been around for a while. If you Google context marketing, you'll find articles from like 2012, which essentially are programmatic advertising
Hmm.
plays. It says essentially, let's use data that we know to put the right message in front of the right person at the right time. That's essentially an iteration on things that we've always known and thought were good, right? Let's just make sure that we have better hyper personalization of our messages. The fundamental aspect of that is, if you apply relevancy to that, it's still an iteration. It still says all we need to do is be more relevant in our messaging, and that's what will drive more demand for our product. And the reality is that's the revolutionary part, is marketing must transcend from the department that creates messages to the owners and sustainers of all experiences across the customer journey. That's a revolutionary concept, right? That moves
Hmm.
marketing out of a siloed department, that makes them a part of everyone's job. We end up with distributed marketing across the organization with citizen marketers, and we start looking at the future. So, context is essentially helping a person achieve their goal at the moment. Relevancy is, how do I take a message and make it relevant to an individual? Where context is, how do I understand their problem and help them solve it?
Yeah, I like that. I like that differentiation a lot. So you said something that talking about the experience across the journey. I'm a B2B marketer for pretty much my entire adult life. Over the last number of years, I've put a lot of my time and energy into this idea of experience. I do agree that marketing is in the prime position to own that experience. But I'll tell you what I see in organizations when I talk to CMOs is they say, yeah, we've been tasked with this, but we've not really been given the authority to impact other parts of the organization. So, what do
Yep.
you say to somebody who's seeing that and saying, customer experience starts long before someone buys something, and it impacts brand, it impacts audience engagement, all the way through to product delivery to customer advocacy. But I only own a portion of that. What is that marketer to do?
Well, first off, they haven't solved the number one problem yet, right? The number one problem is executive buy-in to a new idea of marketing.
Mm.
When the chief experience or the chief executive officer, CEO, understands that, they understand the basic, line we've always understood from business: if it's not measured, it can't be managed or improved. If
Right.
customer experience is not put under a central executive, you can call that the chief experience officer, you can call that the chief growth officer, doesn't matter. Their role is to essentially sit on top of all siloed departments across the organization and ensure that every experience is consistent and connected and contextual. And if you don't have that executive, then you find yourselves in these problems where, how is one executive of one silo branch going to influence another executive of another branch? They have different
Mhm.
goals, they have different measures. And so until we elevate experience to a new executive position and put it over all of what we would call traditional silos, marketing, product, service, support, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, I agree with that. Here's the rub. I'm not trying to play devil's advocate, but now my head is filled with all the discussions I've had over the last number of years. So many executives still, and I'm just going to say CEOs, CFOs, and even partly CROs, chief revenue officers, have this old, dated, dare I say, madmen view of marketing. Where
Yes.
how hard is it? I've given you this money. How come, a quarter later or even 30 days later, our pipeline's not just flooded? So, how does a marketer, what steps in your mind, or maybe your research showed this, should a marketer take to truly start to educate and move us from a era of executive ignorance to executive enlightenment?
I mean, that's one of the core reasons of why I wrote this book. Marketers, it's not that we don't know that this is the way forward. Most of us have a pretty solid understanding that this is the way forward,
Hmm.
right? But there's a major problem that we all face, and that's the simple theory that it's very difficult to be a prophet in your own land. It's very difficult to try to change the underlying organizational structure and go to market strategy of your organization, right? When executives change that, it usually comes from exterior factors. They usually paid some consultant a massive amount of money and now have a high level of investment in this new theory, or they've seen it play out from their other business partners or colleagues have told them this is what's going on, this is how we've done this. Internal change at this level is very difficult, hence why I wrote this book, to help give you that third party validation and provide that research. And there's also another book that you should definitely make sure your executives read, and that's called The Experience Economy. So I think those two
Mhm.
books in combination would be very impactful in helping your executives see kind of what they need to be thinking about, why experience is the highest economic output your firm can produce, and then exactly tactically how to put that in place with the context marketing revolution.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that that is really the goal or the driver behind the book, because it is something, and you just said it, the prophet is without honor in their own land. I go back to when I started my first agency, co-founded my first agency. My first client was actually the company that I had just left. And they hired me as a consultant, and I started to laugh. I was like, "You guys didn't listen to me when I was here, but now that I'm the consultant, you want me to come in and help solve your problem." So you're exactly right. So back to some of what the descriptor on the book, which by the way you can get on Amazon or Barnes and Noble or any of your indie stores, and it's in pre-order now. Highly suggest you go and get it because it's a fantastic book. And as I said, from one of the smartest guys I've ever encountered, and I've
Thanks,
had the
Carlos.
opportunity Matthew, I think we've known each other for almost half a decade at least. But you talk about standing out from the noise, and we
Yeah.
are inundated with media and messages and emails and everything else. So if
Yeah.
I'm a company that's saying, "Hey, my executives have bought in, the experience economy is rule number one. That's the way we're going to grow, and not only grow but sustain." How do you then say, "All right, I'm going to build this"? And then what is the key to not just breaking through the noise, but staying above the noise? Yeah, I can't believe it's a if you build it, they will come.
Yeah, so let's start with number one and let's talk about noise, right? So that was one of the big key factors of this book was redefining what noise is because most brands still assume that noise is from their competitors and that all they need is better messaging to stand out. And the reality is I was able to prove when I said we entered a new media era, it's the first time in the history of the world that consumers are now the largest creators of noise in the marketplace. It's coming from a different player. It
Mm,
operates in a radically different way, and well as the number two largest creator of noise is actually our connected devices. Right? Think about the notification you're going to get on your phone that says you need to have that you've got a meeting coming up while you're listening to this, or your Fitbit to get you to take 10 more steps. Right? Personal media feeds from devices are one of the most motivational forms of media to ever exist. Just think about the basic fact of a
mhm.
Fitbit getting you to take 500 more steps in a day. There is no messaging campaign on the face of the earth that has ever been that effective, right?
Right.
So we must first off understand noise is different. Once we understand that's different, we then see the new creative lens as context, as helping people accomplish their goal at hand. And then by doing that, we break through. But now the next part comes into saying, how do we then make sure it's connected and consistent? And that's
Yep.
really where we get into this idea that we must realize that consumers operate in different ways given a different environment, right? Any consideration is now highly considered, right? Simple things like toothbrushes, the search term for best toothbrush grows at 100% year over year. And that journey lasts 70 seconds and goes across 4 websites, right? This idea that, to break through, and to motivate, we could just have one single thing be so good to your point, right? The idea that the Mad Men era, we can have one campaign so well, it's going to fill our pipeline. The reality is it's lots of tiny moments that are connected together, right? And we must own share of journey. By owning
Mhm.
share of journey, we then drive an increased demand. And it's understanding what that journey is and making sure it's connected and consistent is really kind of the crux of how we then motivate modern buyers to buy more.
Yeah. So thanks for that explanation. I think you're spot on. So, what is the impact internally to a brand or to an organization? Because what you just described is far more, whether it's a consumer setting or a B2B setting, that impacts far more than just marketing. I mean,
Yeah.
that's a major organizational shift. Am I wrong?
No, you're totally correct. And so let's break this down into two real big things. One is this means when we talk about revolution, this is one of the revolutionary ideas, is that marketing no longer is something that you create inside your organization and force out to the world. It's something that you co-create with your marketplace, right? And just think about that one basic concept, right? You're no longer sitting in a room saying, how creative can we be in a brainstorming session? Instead, your first step is saying, who is our market in this moment? What are they thinking, feeling, and doing? And how do we create an experience to help them in that moment? And then to do
Mhm.
that, you then work with the marketplace to actually create that moment. And then look at any major word we're hearing in the marketing sphere and then think about it, right? Influencer marketing, advocacy marketing, right? All of these ideas are human to human efforts, right? We need to be able to connect humans together. And I think that's one of the major pieces of this book is saying, what is the highest level of direct marketing in this infinite media era, in this post attention world? Well, it's not distribution of content. That was the highest form of value in a mass media world. In an infinite media world where consumers are the largest creators of noise and everyone is instantly connected, we've got more connections now than ever before, right? And in fact, 30 times more mobile connections than in 2007, right? So just think about that. The highest thing that we can be doing is connecting others together. It's same theory, word of mouth. It just takes place in a radically different way in the modern era.
Yeah, 100%. So you just hit on something which I'm very passionate about, is that human connection. I think consumer brands are starting to get it. I'm thinking of the Apple commercial that ran around the holidays of the granddaughters who made the video for their grandfather about his wife who had passed, and it was so moving, it was so touching, and you're like, wow, they they just brought such a sentimental, beautiful story around an iPad and how easy it is, right? So consumers, yes, are getting there.
Yeah,
B2B,
but let's take that
it,
idea and let's
sure.
expand even further. And sure, B2B, right? It works for B2B as well, right? Employee advocacy is a simple, easy theory that any
Mhm.
brand must put in place, right? Just because you do the basic math, right? Less than 1% organic reach for any brand. Essentially, a B2B brand with 5 people who engage from their brand in human to human ways can surpass any other B2B brand on social media with an average following of 50,000, which is the average B2B size for social
Right.
audience is 50,000 people. It only takes 5 people interacting in a human to human way, right? And so we start thinking about all the different ways that we can do this and how we can accomplish these things. And it solves major problems, right? We need to think about human to human in different ways, right? Think about how do we create enough content to stay relevant in the modern marketplace, right? It's B2B problem just as much as it's a B2C problem. Just go to
Mhm.
LinkedIn. There is so much content there. You're never going to see a fraction of it. So what brands are going to have to do is they're going to have to move to a fast advertising model or a fast content model where the reality is that consumer expectations of content are now set by the largest creators, hence people. And people create so
Mhm.
much content on a regular basis. We can't simply say, let's create one advertising campaign and play it out for 2 months. Right? We're going to have to find new ways to create enough content to fill that momentary need. And that means relying on our audience to help create content for us. Right? You can look at Coca-Cola, 80% of their content is co-created, right? Daniel Wellington, the startup watch brand, 99.5% of all content about them is co-created. So we need to start thinking about content in these new ways, right? And we start talking about B2B scenarios, and we start talking about context. Let me give you a really easy example about context and how this works
Yeah.
and the power for a brand, right? So at Salesforce, we created the Trailhead community, right? It's the Trailblazer Network. Those are our customers. Anyone in our ecosystem can join this community. And it has 2 aspects to this community. One is it's a community where people can ask and answer questions. Now, why this is important and how this is really contextual to these people is they want to build a personal brand, right? People want to build a personal brand. They want to improve their careers. Well, by creating this community and letting people interact with each other and answer their own questions and help build their own personal brands, 1/4 of all people in the community have found a new job. On the other aspect is education. So we've created courses and a badging system, right? 14 million badges have been completed, right? People have changed their LinkedIn job titles to their status inside of this community. And then what
Mm.
we also find is that customers that join this community, that engage in these educational programs and that engage in helping other people out, they spend twice as much with us and stay customers 4 times as long. So when we talk about these traditional ideas of marketing, if they're supposed to grow the brand, we traditionally think, how can I make something so amazing it puts more people into my pipeline, rather than saying, how do I look at growth as a holistic measure? And how do we apply this idea of context and experiences to the customer journey? And we grow by that way, right? And we can see, it impacts growth in major ways anywhere along the journey. And for B2B brands as well, we're definitely a B2B brand.
Yeah, I love the idea of using your consumers. And I was fortunate enough, I put a post out on Monday, obviously now in where we're recording this here on March 18th. So we're in the middle of Corona lockdown. I put a post on LinkedIn about some tips of working from home. And I've received 2 messages from colleagues saying, hey, thank you for that. We distributed that among our entire employee base. It was very helpful. And I was super honored by that. I just put it out as a kind of a let's be a good citizen of this community that we're all on. But I love the fact that you're saying, hey, we don't have to create all that content. And what a
There's no
better
need
way
to.
to, I agree. And I think to be able to use the voice of the customer to use that content. So my big question is, why in hell are B2B brands not doing this?
Well, it's change, right? And the simple answer is change is difficult and hard. And then the other easy answer is a lot of brands that are new are operating in these models, right?
Mhm.
Most brands are going to have to evolve from where they were to where they are. And that's a major shift. It's going to take a rethinking at the executive level, right? New strategy, new organizational discipline, new ways of working. This is going to require agile ways of working, which most organizations either one, don't understand agile methodologies, or two, are not set up in agile structure. They're set up in a traditional hierarchy with executives and underlings under them.
Mhm.
So it's a lot of major change going on at the same time. So that's the simple answer as to why it's difficult. But when we look at new companies that are starting up right now and comparing them with others, they're operating in radically different ways, and they're easily winning when we compare, how are these methods applied and how are they, doing compared to other brands in the similar sense.
Yeah, and I liked seeing some of these upstart brands saying we're going to do this a new way and put some of the more staid, older, more traditional brands on their heels. So if I'm a marketer in one of these older brands and I'm listening to this podcast, I'm hooked. I've got the book, and I'm like, look, I'm ready to do this. Is this a matter of run to your executive, or is this a matter of better to ask forgiveness than permission and just start doing these things the new way and try to bring both sides to the middle where you're educating your executive, but at the same time you're like, look, I'm just going to go, I'm in charge of content for this brand, I'm going to go do it the new
Yeah,
way. I mean, what
I
would you
do. I
advise
do
that person?
both. I
Okay.
say you have to do both. One is you have to work and get them to buy in at an executive level, right? That's either, depending on how easy your executives are to change, that's either one, going to happen, or it's not going to happen, but you need to try. The second is you can implement a lot of these theories and ideas without any executive approval, right? The executive approval
Mm.
is for organizational change, budgetary change, new oversight over all experiences. But that doesn't mean you can't start operating in agile methodologies now to create more content. Doesn't mean you can start creating a community. You probably already have the directive to create a community, but now start thinking about that community in different ways, right? How do we leverage them to help create enough content for us? How do we leverage them to do things? Here's a great example, right? There's a brand called Acquia, and they found that there was a question posed to Quora. Quora, we all know Quora, the question and
Uh-huh.
answer site. Rather than the brand answering the question, they reached out to their advocates and had their advocates answer the question. Now there's 20 answers, and now that ranks SEO, right? So now it's the number one result found, and the answer is in context because it comes from other people, not the brand, right? So just start thinking about these things in different ways of how do we work with our audience, not how do we work on our audience. And you can start implement these in little ways. And then you can start to bubble that up, and maybe these two things meet in the middle.
Yeah. We could probably go for another half an hour at least. Clearly, you're passionate about it, which I love. There's been so much. I've literally taken over a page of notes. So it's
And you have the
fascinating.
book.
That's right. That's right. Hey, so as I said, we could probably go for another half an hour. Unfortunately, we don't have that time. But let me ask you this. So first of all, the book is going to be released when?
March 24th.
Okay. And then they can find it on Amazon. Is there an audio version yet, or is it just
Yeah,
hardcover Kindle at this point?
hardcover Kindle. The audio version is on its way. And
Okay.
sadly, it's not my voice. They hired some ringer to do it. I mean, that's how Harvard operates. So sorry, guys.
Yeah, I'm going to write a strongly worded letter about that because I think the author, especially with you, you've got a great radio voice, but I'll let the Harvard guys do
I'm
what
not a
they do
pro.
best. Hey, so in addition to the book, where can people find out more about you? How can they engage with you? Give us some of your social handles.
Yeah, so it's M Sweezey, which if you read it real fast is Miss Wheezy, and that's me on Twitter. Yeah, I made that mistake, found out later on. And then on LinkedIn, it's just Mathew Sweezey with one T, Matthew with one T, and that's where I post most of my content, most of my updates. So if you needed to keep up, wanted to catch up with kind of what the future looks like and what I'm researching, that's where you can go.
Great. Well, Matthew, thanks so much. Seriously, every time we talk, it's enjoyable. Every time we talk about marketing, I definitely learn something new. So thank you for that. And for those who are listening, go out and get the Context Marketing Revolution. Actually, buy one for yourself and then buy one for your executives, because you will learn a ton and you will educate your executives. And you could very well be that change agent that moves your organization from the Mad Men traditional era to the new era of context marketing. Thanks so much for taking the time and for being a part of the B2B Growth Show.
Thanks for having me, Carlos.
Great. Well, that is a wrap for this episode of the B2B Growth Human to Human segment. I want to again thank Mathew and thank you all for listening. Have a great day and stay safe.
I hate it when podcasts incessantly ask their listeners for reviews, but I get why they do it, because reviews are enormously helpful when you're trying to grow a podcast audience. So here's what we decided to do. If you leave a review for B2B Growth in Apple Podcasts and email me a screenshot of the review to james@sweetfishmedia.com, I'll send you a signed copy of my new book, Content-Based Networking, How to Instantly Connect with Anyone You Want to Know. We get a review, you get a free book. We both win.